Hello Year 10, hope you're all well. This is the second in a series of lessons looking at and guiding you through specific questions of English language paper 2. Today's focus is going to be on paper 2 question 3, which is a 12-mark question. We advise that you spend 15 minutes on this question, and it's a language analysis question. So it's one of the kind of skills that you've been working on all throughout your kind of secondary school career, if not your primary career as well. So it's a skill that you should feel relatively confident with. And the question focus in the exam will always be something like, how does the writer use language to, and then they'll give you a specific focus. All right, so do take some notes from this lesson, have a paper and pen ready, and hopefully this will be really, really useful for you. Before we start, just like in my previous lesson, which looked at question 2, I'm just going to quickly run through again an overview of the whole paper, just so you've got it in your head what to expect with this specific exam paper. So question 1, it's a simple one, 4 marks, we say about 5 minutes, and it's really just a case of deciding whether a number of statements about the extract, one of the extracts you read, are true or false. Question 2 is what I looked at in my previous lesson, so if you haven't looked at that lesson yet and gone through it, I highly recommend you do. It's the summary question, it's worth 8 marks, and you should spend about 10 minutes on that. Question 3 is what we're going to look at today, and that's to analyse, so it's the skill of analysis, focusing on language and how language works to create specific effects. It's a 12-mark question, and we expect you to spend about 15 minutes on that one. And then question 4 is the biggie, it's worth 16 marks. We recommend you should spend about 20 minutes on it, and it's a comparison question where you look at both the sources that you've been given and you have to compare how the writers have conveyed, which means presented or showed, their attitudes towards or about something that is given to you. All right, so back to today. That should say question 3. I'm very, very sorry, that's a typo. It should say question 3 there. And the question that we're going to look at today, so if you could write this down, that will be really handy for you, is this. In source A, how does the writer use language to describe the incident? All right, so that's our focus for the source that we're going to be looking at. So how does the writer use language to describe the incident? So we need to be thinking when we read and access this source, how is that incident that we're going to read about conveyed to us? What quotations, what evidence can we find that help us see how that incident is being described to us? And those quotes, those bits of evidence that we find, are going to form our response. Okay, so this is the same source that I used in my previous lesson, which looked at question 2, and it's a letter that was published in the Times, so a newspaper, on March the 5th, 1850. So we've already got a bit of a time slant on this extract, that we know it's a source that's from the Victorian era, so it's going to be a bit old-fashioned in style and language. Okay, so I'm going to read it with you. As I read it, keep glancing down at that question. This is going to be an extract that's going to describe an incident to us. So we need to think, as we're reading it, how is that incident being showed to us through language, through quotations that we find. Okay, so we'll have a read. Sir, as the Times is always open for the insertion of any remarks likely to caution the unwary or to put the unsuspecting on their guard against the numerous thefts and robberies committed daily in the streets of London, I am induced to ask you to insert a case which happened on Saturday last, and which I trust may serve as a warning to those of your lady readers who still carry purses in their pockets. A young lady, and, as the police reports add, a very prepossessing appearance, a relation of the narrator's, was walking between 12 and 1 o'clock with another young lady, a a friend of hers in Albany Street, where she resides, when she was accosted by a boy about 11 years of age, who asked her in the most beseeching tones to buy a few oranges of a poor orphan who hadn't a bit of bread to eat. She told him to go away, but he kept alongside, imploring assistance and making some cutting remarks about the ingratitude of the world in general and of young ladies in particular. As his manner became very troublesome, the lady threatened to give him in charge of a policeman and looked down every area to find one. But there was not one even there, and the boy kept up his sweet discourse and slight pushes alternately, the latter with the basket in which he carried his oranges, until the lady reached her own doorstep. It then occurred to her that in the boy's ardour to sell his oranges he might have taken her purse. Her friend thought so too. A trembling hand was inserted into the pocket. The purse was gone, and so was the lady's happiness. She flew after the thief, who, knowing young ladies were not made for running, coolly deposited his basket on a doorstep a little way off and ran away whistling. This brave young lady ran also, shouting, "Stop thief! Stop thief!" But then young ladies are not made for shouting, God forbid. And she looked in the fond hope that a policeman might be found. But no such luck. The culprit got safely off with the purse and its contents, and no kind passer-by tried to help the young lady, who was thus shamefully duped and robbed. Ladies, young and old, never carry your purses in your pockets. Beware of canting beggars and beggars of all sorts that infest the streets. And above all, keep a watchful eye about you and give the widest possible berth to the orange boy. Okay, right, so that's quite, it's not that long, but it's a relatively long extract. And as we've seen in that extract, the incident that we know is the focus of our question is in relation to a young lady who has been robbed by a young boy, 11 years old, who's kind of come over to her, distracted her, charmed her, maybe been a bit rough with her, and in the process of doing so, in the process of trying to sell some oranges to her, which she didn't want, he has stolen her purse and then run away, and didn't really expect her to chase him because she is a woman. There we go. Right, so how is that incident presented to us? Where are the good bits? Where are the good bits of language that we could pick out and write about? Now, I think overall, and this is my advice, so again, be prepared to take some notes here. The first thing we need to think about is how is this incident presented to us? Is it calm? Is it presented to us in quite a dramatic way? Well, yes, I think it is. I think the writer has tried to make the incident seem quite shocking and dramatic. So that's my kind of big idea here, that the incident is presented to us as quite shocking and dramatic. But what language is it that does that? What quotations are there that we can find that show that the writer is trying to make it seem shocking and dramatic? All right, so that's the next thing, the next stage of this process. Which quotations would you pick? Say you had to pick 4, 5 quotations. Which quotes do you feel most confident in being able to explore in terms of that writer's use of language? Where's the good language? Where are the similes? Where are the adjectives? Where are the verbs? Where are the things that we can talk about? So at this point, I'm going to suggest that you press pause and you have a look back at the extract, and without moving forward in this PowerPoint, have a think. Which quotations would you pick? Which quotations could you say the most about in relation to how this incident has been presented to us? Okay, so hopefully you've had the chance to have a look at the extract yourself and think about the quotes that you might pick. Now, there's a whole range of quotations that you might pick. So if you haven't got any of the 3 that you can see on screen now, do not worry at all. This is just 3 that I could use, and these are 3 that I've picked because I think I could say something about all 3 of these that would give me a decent paragraph. So the first one I've got here, as you can see, is the fact that she was accosted by a boy about 11 years of age. I like that quote because I know I could say something about the word accosted, which is quite an aggressive way to go up to someone. If you accost someone, it means you go up to them, quite quickly, quite forcefully. And the fact that he's only 11, I could talk about that. That's very young for a boy to accost someone. So there's a few things I can say about that quote. The second one that I've got there, the boy kept up his sweet discourse and slight pushes. I really like this quote because it's a bit of a contrast. The boy's clearly trying to be quite charming, and that adjective sweet suggests that he's really trying to sell her to, buy some of these oranges off him. Discourse refers to just conversation, dialogue. So he kept up his sweet discourse, but he's pushing her at the same time. So that verb, pushes, I know I could say something about that because there's something not very nice about the fact that he's being very, very sweet and charming, but all the time he's sort of nudging her and pushing her, which is a bit aggressive, it's a bit forceful. Third quotation. This brave young lady ran also, shouting, "Stop thief, stop thief." Right, well, I've got the verb shouting, and the fact that if you're shouting, that's often got connotations of anger or stress or rage or fear. Stop thief, stop thief. Right, well, I've got some repetition there. I've got the use of the exclamatories, the exclamation marks there. So there's plenty I could say about that quotation as well. So note that I've picked just 3. There are more you could pick. There's 3 quotes there that I know that I could use in my response. Now, at this point, I am going to introduce to you the acronym that is really, really useful to remember for paper 2, question 3. It's not an easy one to remember, so I apologise for that, but it is useful. Now, you can say it how you want. I would say it as PMEAZL, but it's P-M-E-A-Z-L. So at this point, write that down. Get those capital letters down. This is a useful acronym for this particular question, and this is what it stands for. So P, as you've probably already guessed, stands for point. So the point that you're going to make about how that incident has been presented to us. The M stands for method. So straight away here, you jump in with a method that the writer has used to present the incident in this way. So that could be the use of imagery, that could be similes, that could be verbs, that could be adjectives, etc., etc. Then you give your actual evidence, so the quotation, a short quotation, maybe even 2 quotations, 2 short quotations that you could put together. Then A is analyse, and that's where you really explore the effects created by that quotation. What do these adjectives do for the text? How do they create this sense of drama, this sense of shock about the incident? Then Z is zoom. Now, zoom is where you really zoom in on a specific word within that quotation in more detail. So you'll see that in a second, how easy it is to spot the key words within your quote. And then L, the final aspect of PMEAZL, is link. And that means you link straight away to another way that the incident has been presented using a building connective. Now you might want to write this down. This means that at the point of link, you use a building connective. And in the blue box on your screen, you'll see 4 really useful building connectives that you could use. Furthermore, moreover, in addition, and additionally. So straight away you're adding to the point that you've previously made. A building connective is really, really useful for this particular question. Okay, so just back to that extract again, you'll see highlighted in yellow are the quotations that I picked to talk through with you. They're the ones that, I've decided that I'm going to work with for now for this question. You'll also notice in purple and underlined are other quotations that I also liked that I also thought I could use. So just to prove to you that there are not, a set of right or wrong quotes that you should pick for this question. All right, so if you have a look through some of those, you might think, oh yeah, I'd spotted that one as well. So have a look through, but again, you're not wrong if you didn't pick the ones that I use, the ones that are highlighted in yellow. Okay, so reminding yourself again of permeasal, that's the approach we're going to take. I'm just going to model for you really, really quickly what I might say about this quotation here. So one of the quotes that I've picked was the boy's sweet discourse and slight pushes. So I've got that in the box in blue. We've got the reminder of what permeasal actually means. But there's no point in trying to write a decent permeasal paragraph unless you've got enough to say about your quotation. So here we go. So again, like I've said already, that adjective sweet, the word sweet, the adjective sweet has got really positive connotations. But in this context, it actually becomes quite sinister because the boy isn't sweet at all. He's manipulative. He's actually a bit aggressive. He's putting on this sweetness to try and get her to buy his oranges, but all he's interested in is that sale. He wants to get as much out of her as he can. He wants to steal her wallet. And then I also like the fact that, he's slightly pushing her the whole time. There's that hint of force there, that verb pushes. This is not welcome contact. Don't forget, this is the Victorian times. So he's charming her, but he's kind of sweetly knocking into her with his orange basket at the same time. So wouldn't be very welcome contact. That verb pushes does kind of clash with that sweetness that we see earlier in the quotation. So that's how I'm breaking down that quote, and that gives me lots to say about the analyse and the zoom aspect of the permeasal paragraph that I'm going to write. Okay, right, so this is where it all leads to, writing it up into a really solid, well-developed permeasal paragraph. So a reminder of the question. In source A, how has the writer used language to describe the incident? Now, I've written for you a model paragraph here, looking at that quotation that I've just broken down for you. So I'm going to read it out loud, read it with me, then read it again, see how I've used those elements of P, M, E, A, Z, L. See if you can spot where they've been used. In source A, the writer has used language to describe the incident in a shocking and dramatic way. He shows this by using the verb pushes alongside the adjective sweet when the boy kept up his sweet discourse and slight pushes. This creates the impression of a boy who tries to manipulate the woman through charm whilst at the same time being physically forceful in order to get what he wants. The adjective sweet has connotations in this context of someone who is kind and friendly, so it is shocking to the reader that he is actually pushing the young woman to try and steal from her. Moreover, this is also conveyed through the aggressive verb accosted in the quotation, accosted by a boy about 11 years of age. Okay, right, as you can see, I didn't quite finish that second bit I was getting onto, but that's for a reason, and that's because I'd like to hand over to you at this point. Now, what I'd like to do at this point, and this will be really, really good practice for you, is either continue the point that I started for you there about the use of that aggressive verb, that accosted. I started it for you on the previous slide, or you could write up your own brand new permeasal point in response to the question using source A. Whatever you'd like to do, whatever works for you, but give it a go. That would be my advice. Also, just remember, try your best. It doesn't matter, really. It doesn't matter. It's you having a go at applying the skills and finding your way through this paper. But do try, my advice would be, to explore the effects created by those quotations in detail. Really dig into what it is about that quotation, that use of language that's making that incident seem dramatic or shocking to us. Right, this point's really, really useful. My students tend to like these a lot, and this is some sentence stems that can help you, that can kind of prompt you within your paragraph to push you on and say something else about that quotation. So we've got this suggests that, this implies that, this gives the impression that, this creates an image of, this creates a sense of, the word in particular has connotations of. All of those are useful sentence stems. You might want to copy them down. You may already have a bank in your head, but either way, feel free to use those today. So, in summary, paper 2, question 3, advice I would give you. Remember, methods, you have to write about the methods that the writer uses, and methods actually just means techniques. So techniques are things like those powerful adjectives or verbs or adverbs or nouns, but also things more figurative language like similes, metaphors, personification, alliteration. And what you're doing with those methods is thinking, well, what do they do? What effects do they create on the text as a whole? My other advice would be, don't forget those building connectives. It's not just about writing one per measle paragraph. It's about writing one per measle paragraph that you then use a building connective to add a second one on, and then a third one on. Embedding those quotations in and really focusing in on the way that the writer uses that language to create those effects. And just be selective about the quotations. Don't just panic and pick the first ones that you see. Choose the quotations that you know you've got enough to say about. Keep them short, whatever you do. Don't copy out great big chunks of text. You could always take a longer quotation and break it down into two and explore sort of separate parts of that quotation separately. Do try to embed the quotations into the flow of your sentence rather than just sort of dropping them in on a line of their own if you can. Look back at my example and you'll see how I've done that. And finally, remember that this is a 12-mark question, so it is, it's quite a big deal in relation to paper 2, and we advise you to spend about 15 minutes on this question in the exam. So that's it for this lesson. I hope it's been useful for you. Please do have a look back at the source and the question and have a think about your own per measle paragraph if you can. Best of luck, Year 10. Take care. Bye-bye.